Daily Soccer Podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionic, the world's most personalised supplements. Bionic provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right level to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionic. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Liverpool Podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. International break is pretty much over now, thankfully, and so we can slowly but surely turn our attention to more important things, namely the Premier League. However, international breaks always leave their mark with the Liverpool Football Club, and this one is no exception. There are a few injury concerns for the Reds, so let's just go through a couple of the players that look like they're going to be out for one or two games, Alisson maybe more. So we'll start with the keeper, Alisson Becker, who was injured at the last Premier League game at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea, pulled his hamstring. You could see pretty much immediately that it was not going to be a good one, and it does look like that he's going to be out for quite some time. Maybe not as huge a miss, because I do think that Georgie Marmadashvili, our backup goalkeeper, is a very, very good goalkeeper, and I'm not nervous about him being in goal. However, Alisson Becker is the best goalkeeper in the world, and so him not being there, even if Marmadashvili is a very, very good goalkeeper, he's a very good goalkeeper, but he's not the best in the world, and so there is some drop off there. So that is a bit of a concern, but he's without doubt. He's not playing on Sunday against Manchester United, so that's one absence that we can say is a definite. The other one is Giovanni Leone. Obviously, he's out for the entire season with that ruptured ACL. But the other injuries that that they are a bit of a concern because they've happened over this international break. Let's start with Ibrahima Konate. He left international duty with France after picking up a thigh injury. He didn't feature for France, and over the weekend made a return to Merseyside. So him not turning out for France, I think, is a real worry, because with a muscle injury, I just don't see how he's going to be ready for Sunday. And I just don't think it's worth the risk, bearing in mind that Leone is out, and if Konate does play on Sunday and he's not 100% fit, and then he really does pull that muscle, and he's out for a significant amount of time, that means that Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez are our only two fit central defenders, and Joe Gomez doesn't have the best injury record, and so I would say that if there's any doubt whatsoever, as much as it would be a blow not to have him turn out on Sunday, I would rather he sat that one out and let Gomez play. He's more than capable as a deputy, and that just means that Konate has got a chance to get fit rather than play and then get injured and just add to our injury problems, which are slowly mounting. So Konate is a major doubt for the United game over the weekend. Wataru Endo, obviously on international duty with Japan, but it looks like he's got a hamstring injury, which is going to see him out for a few weeks. So it looks like we're looking at November before Endo returns. Now, obviously, he's a bit part player. He's not a regular, but with these defensive issues, the injuries in the defensive third. Endo is one of our backup players, and so we've got to be careful that we don't kind of exacerbate any situation that he's got going. The other one, which is a real worry, and that's Ryan Gravenberch. Gravenberch was substituted at half-time in the Netherlands game against Finland, and that was because Gravenberch had complained about a potential injury to his hamstring. And so he was withdrawn, which, you've got to give credit to, Ronald Koeman and the backroom staff at the Dutch national team for not risking him any further. But it just means that he's coming back with a, suspected hamstring injury, and that is definitely not something that you want to risk. Because if he pulls a hamstring, well, he's out for, a good while, and he is so pivotal to how we play in midfield. I mean, that said, we do have options. We do have Szoboszlai, we've got McAllister and Wirtz. So it wouldn't be the end of the world if Gravenberch sat this one out. But it is something that Arne Slot is going to have to be wary of, and these are one of the decisions that he's going to have to make before Sunday when Manchester United come to town. We are going to go on a very, very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to look back at FSG's reign as the owners of Liverpool Football Club. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs. It's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. This week marks 15 years since FSG, then known as New England Sports Ventures, bought the club, and what a 15-year reign it has been. 2 Premier League titles, a Champions League title, 3 Champions League finals, FA Cups, League Cups, UEFA Super Cup, a Club World Cup. It's seen us, dining regularly at the top end of the table. Now, ownership in football is a topic that rarely kind of spawns positive comments from football fans. I think at best we're quite indifferent to owners, and particularly with owners who are increasingly, they're based overseas, so there isn't really that kind of connection. But what is the overall feeling about FSG's reign as custodians of the football club? I think you've got to start by looking at where we were as a club when John Henry and Co. Bought the club. Hicks and Gillette were the 2 previous American owners, and they were an unmitigated disaster. They took the club over from the Moores family, who had owned Liverpool for decades. They oversaw one of Liverpool's most successful periods during the 70s and the 80s, but they did oversee the decline of the club during the 1990s, particularly the 1990s, because I think that's where the club just got left behind by the likes of Manchester United, and then the new money that came into Chelsea. But even if you were to leave the kind of Chelsea thing to one side, I think Liverpool as a club just failed to recognise where football was heading. They failed to see the opportunities that the Premier League offered, and Manchester United were quick to jump on that, and they capitalised on that. And, we just see the success that comes in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. And so the Moores family, they can see that they've tried, they've backed manager after manager, and they did back managers. They backed Graham Souness with money. They backed Roy Evans and Gerard Houllier with money, but it just wasn't enough. They were barely scratching the surface in terms of money that was being spent by Manchester United and increasingly by Chelsea. And that's when the search in the kind of early to mid 2000s began for a new owner to come in and to try and put the club back to where it belonged. And there were two potential buyers for the Moores family to sell the club to. One were the two Americans, co-owners, Tom Hicks and George Gillette, two owners of sports franchises in the United States. And the other option was Dubai. Dubai Holdings, I think it was. And the Moores family, for whatever reason, thought that Hicks and Gillette would be the better option. And we were sold to these two owners. And as I said before, their reign was an absolute disaster. They very famously said that they'd be building a new stadium, and they did spend money. They bought in the likes of Fernando Torres. They backed Rafa Benitez. But just the way that the club was being run, it just soon became very apparent that these two guys were not the ones to take the club up back to the next level. It didn't help that the two co-owners then fell out and just left the club in limbo and pretty much on the verge of administration. Things on the pitch were not that much better. Rafa Benitez, huge fan favourite after his Champions League win in Istanbul, he was sacked. And in comes Roy Hodgson to really cement the club's kind of downward spiral. I think Roy Hodgson, without any question in my lifetime, is the worst manager to manage at the club. And he's possibly the worst ever Liverpool manager. He was just the wrong fit on every level. He was completely clueless in terms of understanding the club, connecting with the fans. We were losing to teams that we should just not have been losing to, and he was constantly telling the club's fans that we had to be realistic in terms of our ambitions, and that the landscape had changed. And although you could argue that to an extent he was right, the landscape had changed, but he was making very kind of David Moyes-like public pronouncements, much like Moyes when he took over from Sir Alex Ferguson. He was almost trying to lower not just the expectations but the standards. Because even if you're not doing very well, even if the team is not playing well, you don't have the right players. I think if you're a manager of Liverpool or if you're a manager of Manchester United, you can never say that you're not aiming to win, or you're not aiming to go for a title or a cup win or a Champions League qualification. I think it's just really, really dangerous. And so that's where we were. And the club were staring at administration. Former club managing director Christian Purslow said in an interview years ago that we were one day away from administration before the deal was agreed with FSG, who were NESV at the time, for £300 million. The club was bought for £300 million, which Hicks and Gillette called quote, an epic swindle. And I suppose if you look at the valuation of the club now, something between £4 and £5 billion, according to Forbes. I mean, that is some return on investment. But I do remember when FSG came in, there was nervousness about being sold to another group of American owners. There was this natural distrust that they were just coming in to maybe asset strip the club, just to take money out of the club in much the same way that the Glazers had done to Manchester United. But I think if we had done our research on John Henry and FSG, I think this is a completely different animal to Hicks and Gillette. FSG have got I think they've got a stellar reputation when it comes to going into sports franchises and, turning them around, building them up into, into really top elite level sporting organizations. And nothing spells that out more than what they did at the Boston Red Sox, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was something like 80 odd years that they hadn't won the World Series, and FSG helped them win that World Series. And so they have a track record. And although it hasn't all been plain sailing, they have made a few mistakes, raising of ticket prices, which led to fan protests, was a misstep. It was a miscalculation. The failed European Super League was another really bad one. And Liverpool were kind of front and centre of trying to launch that. But to their credit, they retreated very quickly and they publicly apologised very quickly, in much the same way that they did when they tried to trademark the word Liverpool, which, looking back again, it just you do wonder why they did that. If you're looking charitably at it, as owners, I suppose you do have a responsibility to look at every available option to try and get an advantage, to try and increase the club's revenues, because unfortunately that's what football is now. It is a huge commercial juggernaut, and if you're not getting your piece of that juggernaut, then you're just going to be overrun by it. And so, Liverpool going in to try and create that Super League was a big miscalculation, not just by them, but all of the English clubs that were involved. And they saw that through the fan protests that broke out across the country. But apart from that, they have, I would say, in the modern era, I'd say that they have been almost flawless club owners. They have invested massively in the infrastructure of the club. First off, by deciding that Anfield would not be knocked down. There would be no new, shiny stadium in Stanley Park. Anfield was something special. And in much the same way that FSG did the same to the Boston Red Sox with, I think it's Fenway Park. That is not one of the biggest stadiums in America when it comes to baseball, but it does have a history. And I like the fact that John Henry and co, they looked at that stadium and said, this is too much of a plus point for us. By getting rid of this stadium, we lose something. And I think that was such a good decision to expand the stadium and not to get rid of it. And so the main stand expansion happened in 2016, Anfield Road extension in 2024, and that brought the stadium capacity up to 61,000, which, that's where it should be. It should be no less than 60,000. I mean, it should be more, but as a minimum, that should be the right level. And, I just think that, you improve the atmosphere of the stadium, more people come to see, you've got increased gate revenues. And so I think that was the first thing they did, which I think was a really, really good decision. The new training facility, they invested £50 million developing the AXA Training Centre, which was completed in 2020. And that is a world-class facility. And so I think FSG's focus, you can see, has been on whatever they do, it's got to be best in class. So whether it's the manager, whether it's training facilities, the backroom staff, the recruitment, both of players, but also the actual recruitment process and the recruitment team, the analytics, the data guys, all of that has got to be the best in class. And that's been apparent with the people that have been running those departments. I think they've got probably pound for pound some of the best investment, the best decisions in football over the last 10 years. If you look at some of the players that we've signed, Mohamed Salah was around about the 35 million pound mark. Bobby Firmino is 30 million. Sadio Mane, 30 million. And then even the likes of Andy Roberts was, I think, about £6 or £8 million from Hull City. And yes, we spent big when we had to, the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Alisson Becker, well-known signings after selling for Felipe Coutinho. But I think that the watershed moment for both FSG and the club was Jurgen Klopp coming to the club, and that's got to go down. That's to some part to FSG and their ability to attract Jurgen Klopp to the club, which was not in a great state when he took over. But they identified the right man, and they identified the right man for the model that they wanted for the club as well. A modern football structure with a sporting director and a manager that can help the club maximise the player potential. And that was the idea behind Brendan Rodgers' appointment. It was a modern coach, and his remit was to get the best out of these young players. And it looked like it was going to work in that season where we nearly won the title, but it was a failed title bid. And quickly after that, it spiraled fairly quickly after that. And so Klopp coming to Liverpool, it was the personality that FSG needed to really kind of cement those structural changes that meant that would be translated onto the pitch as well. And when it comes to money, I think FSG, I think we've always been very conservative in terms of spending. Liverpool have always been supporters of financial fair play and PSR. Unlike some clubs that we could mention, we've never looked to bend or outright break the rules in order to spend money. What we spent, we spent within our means. And for me, that is the absolute embodiment of a well-run club. So 15 years of FSG, I think you've got to say that overall it's been a very, very successful period. And it doesn't look like they're going away anytime soon. And I think that's got to be a good thing. We've got a very, very stable club. We've got a very, very good manager. We've got a great set of players. And I think that the next 5 to 10 years, I think we're looking to cement the success that we've enjoyed over the last decade or so. Okay, that is all for today. You've been listening to the Daily Liverpool podcast brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Join us again tomorrow as we begin the build-up to the return of the Premier League and the visit of Manchester United at the weekend. And until next time, we'll see you soon.
Your daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.